Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where the light at the end of the tunnel is always a fast approaching train. Wait, no, that didn't quite come out right. Anyway, welcome back to the Bitcoin SV train. Hope you're all surviving or enduring your coronavirus lockdowns. We're not on lockdown here, but kind of have the opposite problem. Way too many people in the house. Starting to crave a bit of the old social isolation again. So hopefully things looking up soon. But don't worry, things are always looking up in Bitcoin land, and today I have yet another sign of that. Probably one of the friendliest and most talented people in Bitcoin today. It's Darren Kellenschwiler. You probably know him better as Deggen on Twitter, Twitch, and everywhere else. He's the developer of Roundtable, the business social network, and also, more importantly, Baymail. That's Baemail. If you haven't tried that out, check it out. We'll be putting up the address later. I caught up with Deggen at the end of last year, I think, and since then, he's been doing a fair bit. He's been adding quite a few more new features to Baymail, and we chatted about that and some other things besides. So, on with the show. Later. So we're in about, what is it, week 6, week 7 of the house arrest now? You look like you're set up pretty well.
I'm very fortunate. Yeah, I've got a good setup here because I knew maybe 4 or 5 months ago that I was going to be under voluntary house arrest from that point on.
Really? How do you know that?
What I mean is not that I orchestrated the pandemic.
Right.
I mean that I knew that I was going into a life of predominantly coding and building up this business, and that I wouldn't necessarily need to leave anymore because we were moving to a place further out of London where we could afford some space where we could actually have an office here. So
I'm actually totally okay with the house arrest thing. I've been working like this for the past 7 years, or even maybe 10 years longer than that. What I can't deal with is like having everyone around all the time in my house while I'm under house arrest. If I'm going to be house arrest. If I'm going to be under house arrest, I want it to be solitary.
Yeah, solitary confinement, please.
Yes. Well, anyway, I'm going to have you here today to talk about Baymail and maybe a bit of Round Desk too, if you'd like to, because I think we haven't really heard much about that. I did an interview with you last year on MetaNet TV for Baymail, so we found out all the basics there, and probably a lot of other stuff that I've forgotten all about. But I do remember what Baymail is. I do use it, and I guess this is for the people who may not know it yet, and for the people who do know it, and they just want to hear the latest. I guess the big news is the invisible money button.
Yes, I think that although RelayX had an invisible button, so to speak, for months now, I think still the dominant user base of Money Button means that the introduction of invisible Money Button brings that far superior user experience, along with some improvements generally to Baymail's experience that sort of coincided with that. To Baymail. So yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big upgrade in user experience. It's predominantly an upgrade in speed, and part of that is achieved by doing the swiping under the hood and allowing the user to move on. So much in the same vein as the idea with Baymail is that you can see your highest priority messages, deal with them, and move on with your life. Mm-hmm. The actual UX now responds in that same way. So it's like a fractal of the overall vision. So for example, we can have a back and forth, quick replies to a conversation, and it will appear real time as we're sending them, and we can move on and take a look at other messages, and they will just send in the background as they encrypt. So to explain why that's a slow process, it's essentially it uses very secure encryption, and that library that it uses to do that encryption is not super quick, because it's all built on JavaScript, which is which is good and runs fast in most browsers, but sometimes it can take a while. and it's certainly not as snappy as something in C++ would be, for example.
Right.
So it was important to detach those things, and I'm not the first person to do that. Obviously, this is conceptually what most people are doing, like Twitch, for example. I have had this for a while with the way they're marketing is was it one touch payments or something like that.
It's kind of funny how fast we moved on all of that. Like when the first time we saw Money Button, it was just like, oh wow, I can do a Bitcoin payment just by clicking this little switch. That was so easy and quick. And then after a while, it's just, I wish this little switch would just go away because, like it's a pain in the butt trying to slide it all the time every time I actually want to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think Money Button did us a tremendous service because they allowed us to articulate things and express things in a way that was marginally easier to understand than doing things with raw transactions.
Yeah.
Like, so if you can conceptualize paying with a button, then you can conceptualize all sorts of things that you could build with that new sort of superpower you have, which is to pay with a button anywhere. So you just sort of insert that wherever you need to.
Yeah, it was just like it was a stage we needed to move through.
I think so. And the invisible money button is so easy to convert to if you've built an app on Money Button, because it literally, so rather than being a whole new complicated API, it gives you the same exact code that you would normally render a button from, and it just gives you a function swipe, where as the developer you can swipe the button and nobody has to see it. And I just love that concept. That really, I mean, it's allowed me to build things quicker than if I was just using like a completely new library that you had to do specific things other than the thing we've already been using. So I think Money Button are a massive advantage for having kept that really simple. And Miguel said that they had gone through a couple of different iterations. They'd landed on that for that reason, I think. So they've done their due diligence, and it's paid off, I think.
I think it's also a sign that we're getting more used to the whole micropayments economy that Bitcoin's always promising too, because we started off when by just making Bitcoin payments for big specific things. Like you buy a product, you pay for it, and in that case, Money Button is just great. It seems really easy. But when you're doing something like Twitch or Baymail or any of those things, you really don't want that extra step. So it's just a sign of how much more common these little sort of incidental payments are becoming, and that's good.
I think that's good. Yeah, I mean, as a business that's built on top of that premise of microtransactions are the way forward, you can imagine this drastically increases the number of sort of microtransactions per second that Baymail is capable of, because no one's waiting around for processing. Tap a button and move on, and it's a penny here, a penny there. The user doesn't really notice or care about that amount of money, but it adds up. That's the whole point of microtransactions, right?
So what's the throughput like for Baymail? Are you hitting the stage, of transaction volume where you have to do a special deal with a miner or something?
No, I don't think we're there yet, because it's still like all human generated, and I don't have more than a couple of thousand users, so it's not quite on that level yet. But I have started. I built something for splitting out revenue specifically, so that I can start thinking about bringing on new developers. And I'm in conversations with a few of them who have done some work on things like an Android app, and just some consulting on this sort of security, the IT security of backend and that sort of thing, just to make improvements there. So in terms of going massively up in volume, in terms of users, the reason I've been off the pedal since CoinGeek is because I know that there are still security implications with the current Paymail setup. So I'm in talks with, well, I'll put it this way. I actually think that RelayX is technically more secure at this point, because it limits the decryption to only allow it on baymail.me.
Right.
Whereas So they do something which is Bitcom locking. So basically, if the data starts with a particular Bitcoin address when it's being output in terms of the op return, then it will allow its users to decrypt things if there's that Bitcom and you're doing it from this website. Otherwise, it will stop. So, for example, if someone went to Twitch and tried to decrypt, if Twitch tried to hide in an invisible money button all of their Bay mails and decrypt them in the back end and store them to a server, technically they could do that right now and no one would probably notice.
Right.
That's bad, obviously. So, I mean, yes, technically only the user could do it.
Yeah.
But if they trust the app, then they're potentially could be compromised. So we knew about the developers knew about this for a long time, months and months and months and months, and yet still we don't have a solution. So I proposed a solution a couple of weeks back, and I'm hoping that will fix it for Money Button. And as I said, RelayX have a unique solution which they're comfortable with, and I think is good for now.
What's it been like, working directly with those guys? Like with Ryan and with Jack from RelayX. Are they? I'm like, be honest. Are they easy to work with?
Oh, totally. The reason I'm laughing is because Ryan X had blocked me months and months and months and months ago, and he was like, "I don't remember blocking you." So I joked that I had offended him at some point.
Yeah,
I think it might have even been years ago, come to think of it.
Yeah.
But it's really funny because I always found him really cold. I was just like, geez, Ryan's kind of an asshole. But because he just ignored me all the time. But it's because I was like shadow blocked or something. So we kind of laughed at that like a month ago when we finally realized that. And I posted half of the conversations that I'd, because he must have thought, this Deggen guy's pretty rude. He's not responding to me.
Well, I've done this a couple of times on Twitter. When you do the drop-down menu for mute conversation, block user is right underneath it. And there's some people who post a lot. And, if they tag you, you get a lot of replies. So I want to just mute that conversation so it doesn't fill up with replies. And then I'll just accidentally fat finger the block user. And then I don't even notice it until years later or something. And I'm like, oh. Shit,
maybe it's a similar situation.
Yeah, well, we like to think it is. Apart from
that, yeah, no, they're fine. Like I remember first. At first, I mean, I don't really care about like celebrity stuff anyway. Like, because I was in the film industry and there were like actors walking by. It's just like, who cares? Like, they're just normal people, right?
Yeah.
So I feel a lot more sort of. I felt a lot more, what do you call that, celebrity sort of flushed immune? Or whatever by...
Right.
Sorry?
I was going to say you're celebrity immune.
Well, maybe. But what I meant is the crypto people are much more important to me than like random actors.
Gotcha, yeah.
So like I do have great respect for those people. But they're just normal people. They're very smart, but otherwise pretty normal people. Maybe a little bit more confrontational than the average person, but in a good way.
Yeah, I guess they tend to be a bit confrontational with each other, I think, and there's not a whole lot of that in BSV, at least not in public. I think from the user end, we see this like big happy community that likes to get together at CoinGeek and have a big party and that. And,
right.
But yeah, I know in the background there's a bit of to and fro going on. There's a bit of tension, who gets which idea to market first and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into the gossip or anything. I was just trying to get a picture of what it's like, as a developer when you have to work with these people. Like,
sure.
Is it an easy process?
I understand what your question is at this point. So yes,
I'm being really general.
Sometimes it's a little difficult because, and I've said this before, I'm trying to be the Switzerland of the BSV community, where I'm like, I'm neutral. I don't care. I will use whatever works. If you can bring a user base to me, I will work with you as a wallet. But there are definitely factions, and there are definitely schools of thought that are in opposition almost directly. So it's difficult to work with everyone. And I think that so far I've sort of balanced that a little bit. And lent one way or the other some of the time. But I think there are valid criticisms on both sides. So I mean, most of the argument I've heard, at least, are things like if you get lots of investment, then you can really take your time on doing something. And there are arguments for that, saying, yes, but then you can get it done very well and securely and properly. On the other side, it's like, yeah, but you end up like delaying the entire ecosystem 18 months as you develop something. So it's really a negative thing if people get lots of investment, because it removes that entrepreneurial fire under your arse to actually get it done. So, you know, I'm sort of sympathetic to both of those sides of the argument, which is irritating. Perhaps it would be better if I could just decide and alienate myself from one of the factions. But so far, I've found myself straddling them both.
You'd be amazed at the competition I've seen happening in Bitcoin media. Like you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like you wouldn't think you'd see people from like CoinDesk and Bitcoin.com and all that sniping at each other, but there's all sorts of skullduggery going on behind the scenes.
Really? Well, I suppose I'd prefer that to the situation with the mainstream media, where they all seem to echo each other and say exactly the same stuff, even though they're supposed to be in opposing political stances.
Yes. It's also funny if you ever go into Parliament House or anything like that and you see all these guys who just spend all day yelling at each other and insulting each other, they'll just walk past in the hallway and they're like, oh, hey, hi, Ted.
Totally, yes. That theatrics, isn't it?
Going back to work again.
And to be fair, I actually think that that's probably part of what some of the guys are doing, right? So, I mean, I've vaguely engaged in that myself more recently, but it's pretty out of character for me because I'm generally speaking, I'm pretty agreeable. So sort of pretending to be way more disagreeable than I am is a little uncomfortable, I'll be honest. But it's good fun sometimes to just be like, you're shit, and call someone out on something, you know?
Well, you are literally Swiss, aren't you?
No, I am literally Swiss.
That
Yeah,
should
so like half Swiss though. So even there, I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So
you're only half neutral.
Yeah, exactly. The other part is Scottish, so imagine my face painted blue of that saltire raging in the fields with a Excalibur or whatever.
That's quite a combo. I could make some jokes about that, but they're probably not funny, so I'm not going to go there. Tell us more about Bay Mail anyway, because
yeah, that's what we're here to speak about.
We are. I don't want to keep you for a super long time because I know you got stuff to do. But yeah, maybe
it's not perfect. There's bugs, so I need to get on them. It's,
I
can't spend too long. But.
Yeah, my worst nightmare is like someone encounters a Bay Mail bug and decides not to use it anymore because you were talking to me on Zoom.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen. I've got a sort of team of interested developers who are being really supportive and telling me when they find bugs. So shout out to Joshua Hensley and Andrew. I don't know how to say his last name. I've never said it out loud. Condolin, Andrew Gondolin of Logger.
I'm not going to try and say it either.
Those guys have been great for just feeding back, like, this is broken and this is broken and you need to do this. And yeah, it's been really good. Cool. Before I sort of spiral into chatting about something that I'm not supposed to, the one thing I really wanted to talk to you about is not just Invisible Money Button, but the things that I had been waiting to release because my Git skills are terrible. So I had like merged in all these new features before I was able to launch Invisible Money Button. So I kind of screwed myself over and had to wait to release a bunch of features. So search is one of those features. So you can actually search through your subject lines for now. And the idea is to also build in a feature where you can search the actual content. That's a little bit more finagly because you've got to decrypt it locally first and then search your local database. So, but that will happen eventually. But the cool thing is you can now find stuff, which was a real user experience issue for a long time. I don't know about you, but I have thousands of Bay mails now, and actually finding an old conversation is kind of difficult. So of course, what's the main thing that people do? Well, they put them in folders back in the 90s. But these days, I don't know anyone who doesn't just search their inbox. So that was the more important out of those two things in my head, at least. So
I do that with every
search
file on
works.
my computer now. I don't actually look through folders. I just type it in the search bar.
Yes, exactly.
Then I can never
So
remember what I called it.
right. You need to narrow it down by category. Yes, well, folders will come as well, but for now, search is working, and it seems to be working. You could search the person you've sent to by their name or their pay mail, and the name will be pulled from Roundesk, and their bio is pulled from Roundesk. So if they are just a, I don't know, Python developer, you can just type in Python, and it will probably bring up all of your conversations with people who had the word Python in their bio, that sort of thing. So.
Nice. You know, I really wanted to try out those new features when you mentioned them the other day, and I go into Baymail and I'm like, all right, I'm going to try the search thing, and then I realized I've only got one Baymail in my inbox, and I think that was the one I was using to test
Right.
when you first launched it last year, and I was doing the last video.
Fair.
It's
Okay.
I love Baymail, by the way. I think it's awesome, but the only problem
The
is
onboarding problem.
no one wants to pay to send me a mail. That's my problem.
Okay.
Did I set my price
fair.
too high at $50? I don't know. Maybe that's
Yep.
maybe that's it.
Maybe.
You have this
So,
thing when you're a journalist. I mean, when you or a reporter, whatever you want to call it, you want some people to be able to contact you for free, or you would even pay them for a response. But
yes.
if it's a PR person, you want them to pay you. So is there any way like you can differentiate between recipients? I guess that's kind of complex, isn't it?
That is, yeah. I know what
Senders,
you
I mean,
mean.
not recipients.
Actually, in the investment pitch day, that was one of the responses from one of the guys in the room. I think he came to me afterwards and was saying that people filter not by value in their inbox, but by who. They make a sort of human assessment of who it is that's contacted them and choose to open the message depending on that. So you need two things for that, as far as I'm aware, which is sort of identity, which, I mean, identity is still in Baymail, that's why it's there, but also the subject line. That's why I've started including subject lines. So something that's already decrypted, it only encrypts to Baymail servers, so the Baymail can see it, decrypt it for you, so you know what it is before you open it, kind of thing. So I think that was an important piece of feedback that's changed part of how Baymail works. And I do agree that you're going to respond differently from something that says, yo, John, got this huge scoop. Do you want to go live with it? Bloody. And you probably pay them for the scoop. And you can do that with Baymail now using the sell feature. So if you're writing a message that's a scoop to John in future, then your pitch line can be, this is important information about some crypto scandal or whatever, and they can set the price for you to decrypt it to get the scoop from them. Like there's no further interaction required. They can just, with their outreach Baymail, they can sell the information to you. So I think that's going to be important. But also things like videos, images, that's the thing. That's going to be the next feature that comes out on Baymail. I already have the send functionality working. I am halfway through getting the decrypt functionality and download functionality working.
Nice.
Because Unwriter's new tools are extremely fast, very efficient, and much more complicated from a technical perspective. So I'm like, since I'm already new to this, it's beyond me. So I'm seeking help on that front. Anyway, so those are some of the features I wanted to talk about. So you'll be able to attach files. Most importantly, all of the file uploaders in BSV at the moment, apart from, I think, BitSent by Bitcoin Sophia, Alex. So that was encrypted files, but it was only up to 100 kilobytes, sorry. Whereas Baymail will allow limited only by the miner has to accept the TX. It will automatically decrypt things, chunk them up into several TXs, all with invisible money button in the background. So far, at least.
I'm gonna sound totally stupid again because I'm not a dev. I can't code. I know very little about coding. I can probably write "Hello World" in C++ or something, but that's about it.
Oh, so okay, cool.
I Yeah, I mean, this seems like a nightmare to me. It just seems like this. I mean, if you're using platforms and systems that have existed for years, that's fine. But Bitcoin, it's all being built like as you're working on it. So it's like, I see the
Ye-
whole appeal of the stable protocol now.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I mean, it reminds me of the scene from Wallace and Gromit. Do you ever watch those movies?
Oh yeah.
When the dog Gromit is on a mini train going
Hmm.
through his house, and he's putting the track down in front of him as he's
Yeah,
moving.
yeah. I remember
That's
it well.
exactly what it feels like. Um,
Except it works for him. Like he actually doesn't crash until right at the end. I'd probably crash after the
yes.
third piece of track.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, certainly, I mean, I've learned slowly over these months that the best thing you can possibly do is have error messages that tell you which part broke.
Mm.
Like really
Oh, well, even for me,
explicit,
yeah.
be very detailed about exactly what broke. So I try to do that these days. Whereas at first I was just like, I'll just say error.
Or just
Um,
not do anything at all. It's the.
or just don't, you just crash horribly, restart the
Hmm.
server. Um, but yeah, I found a couple of, um, I've had plenty problems. I think in terms of Unwriters tools, like I use them a lot. So I'm on that Slack all the time, being like, "Hey, your this server in particular is down or giving a 500 error or something." So, but generally speaking, his tools are amazing. Like there's
Hmm.
no way I would be able to do what I'm doing right now without people like Unwriter doing their really low level, heavy lifting idea generation in terms of being able to conceptualize things really clearly and explain them to people like me who are less of a sort of machine code type person, if that makes sense.
Totally
Um,
understand.
he's definitely lower level in terms of his understanding of how these things work.
Have you met Unwriter face to face?
I haven't actually. I missed him by a day in New York because I was over there for a wedding, but
Yeah.
I couldn't stay. But yeah, so I can really speak to that. But he's super nice in Slack, and I probably pester him um, with my low level questions a little bit too often. Um, but the people I've been pestering more recently are the sort of group that sort of slosh around Twitch and that sort of cultural group, if you could say that. And they have some very cool ideas that would, like you were speaking about, it would almost be a sort of protocol change for Baymail at least. I'm always interested in having those conversations though, because ultimately I want to be part of something that's bigger than just my company. I don't imagine everyone in the world will use Baymail tomorrow, but I think that I have a shot at competing to be one of the user interfaces for a protocol that many, many different applications can use. Um,
Yeah.
so I've been speaking to Tokenized and speaking to Unisot, speaking to BitSV and the guys associated with those companies to try and figure out something that's more like a universal standard that's more secure than the current situation, where there could be exploits if you give permission to an app that then does something bad. I know that Twitch won't do that. And I know that obviously Baymail won't do that with people's data on other sites, and BitSV won't do that. But there could be some malicious app that comes along and does that, and people should be aware of that. That they shouldn't be granting permission to just any old app. They ought to know who the developers are, and they ought to trust them before doing that sort of thing.
I guess at least you get to hook into third party wallets, whereas you don't have to build a wallet yourself. To me, that would be the biggest nightmare in Bitcoin is to try and build a wallet and then give it away for free, so you're not actually making a whole lot of money on it until you plug in other services. But yeah, just the idea
Totally.
of building something that has to keep people's money secure, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that people who are willing to take that risk are going to make money in this industry. But that's what it is. You're taking on risk, right? You
Yeah.
could be in real trouble if you screw that up for people. I mean, but I have heard criticism of all these wallets being like they're not as secure as you think they are, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a little worrying, but I can't pretend to understand how that might be the case. I mean, having said that, I have built a wallet. It's cinymeta.net. I built a really basic wallet, and it was to test the concept of doing metanet messages or encrypting to metanet nodes rather than encrypting to just one public key, which is how Paymail currently works. But I've since been discussing domain locked keys with MoneyButton, at least, and I think that's probably the way forward. So if you imagine if you make a request, so I'm a user on Baymail, and I make a request for a domain key. So it combines my user and the website I'm calling from, and it creates a key that's specific to that website and that user, and it encrypts to that.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So if you can prove that somehow, then that's the way to do it. So Dean keeps coming into my head on this conversation, and he says, we have this massive, extremely secure distributed system, and then we're using DNS to pay people. It makes no sense. Like we should have some on-chain system that actually uses Bitcoin to do the sort of conversion from a Paymail looking thing to an address looking thing, right? Which is a fair point. I agree with him there. Yeah. So anyway, I've been thinking about looking more into some of his proposals.
Yeah. Well, if you're a developer and into that sort of thing, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities in the coming years to. Well, you basically have to rebuild the internet.
Yeah. That's exactly what's happening. Yeah, I mean that's what the MetaNet name is for, right?
Yeah,
rebuilding how we connect to each other.
Exactly. All right. Well, probably by this stage, if there's anyone who doesn't know what Baymail is, they're probably turned off. But just on the off chance, I think maybe we should rehash that part. Like who actually uses Baymail and what for? They basically someone pays to send you money. Someone pays to send you an email.
Yes.
Is that it in a one-liner?
Not exactly anymore. I guess I would say, what's the one-liner? The one-liner with Baymail is bringing economics into your inbox. So it allows you to harness economics for all sorts of different purposes within your inbox. So it's not just being able to accept payments and using that as a signal. These days, you can use a protocol called Boost POW.
Yep.
Which allows you to attach proof of work to messages if you prefer that type of signal.
That was the other thing I was going to ask you about.
Okay, we can get into that. So I wanted to create a suite of tools for people to use within their inbox. So you can pay people, you can ask for payment from people to decrypt a message, and you can attach a costly signal. Those are the first three options. And I will add and remove different options as we go along. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I just want to give people tools so they can improve their person-to-person communications. Okay,
then. Well, I think Boost PRW was kind of... You said it was controversial, didn't you?
It's a little controversial, yeah.
Yeah. What makes it so? I saw people arguing about it, and my first thought was, I don't really understand why.
You don't really understand why you would use Boost?
Well, I think after I looked into it a bit more, I thought that, but that's not Boost's fault. That's probably my fault for just not knowing enough about it. But why was its inclusion with Baymail an issue?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. The sound broke up.
Why was it sort of a dilemma for you to include it in Baymail or not?
Why did I include it in Baymail?
Why was it controversial?
Oh, I see. So why was Boost controversial to bring into Baymail? I think because it was one of two immediate options. 21E8 and Boost Power basically competing to be the proof of work algorithm that people use for costly signals within the BSV space. Now, I'm not sure if they consider each other direct competition, to be fair. And I'm going to host a there's going to be a crossover London San Francisco event, which includes a discussion about that, to do with proof of work, as well as all the other things that have been coming out recently. So they'll go into that and they can explain for themselves, because I'm not the owner of either of those sort of companies. But I guess I was in discussion with both of them for a little while in terms of like, how do we incorporate Baymail and these protocols for signaling, and what's the point, that sort of thing. And Boost had a really, really simple way to allow existing miners to hash the content. And they did that very cleverly. I mean, Daniel Kravitz came up with this design for Boost, which allowed the sender of the message to construct something that looked identical to a Bitcoin block header, which is what the miners all hash already.
Right.
So if you send that to a miner, a machine that's been purpose-built, an ASIC miner that's been purpose-built to hash exactly that size of data into that exact double SHA, then you can use the existing infrastructure and all of this hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in infrastructure to hash content as well as Bitcoin block headers. So I think that was why it compelled me to implement that first. It's also controversial because CSW, for example, said that it's nonsense.
Oh,
that was the main controversy in my mind.
Man, that's kind of like the kiss of death in BSV, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding. But I think that fired up some of the guys' engines in terms of they're quite happy for it to be not necessarily genuflecting to CSW.
By CSW, we mean Craig Wright, of course.
Yeah.
For any non-Bitcoin people who watch this.
Thanks. I want to articulate his argument, if I can try. So roughly what he was saying was, Bitcoin itself is proof of work because the miners had to mine it into existence. So there would be no difference between someone paying Boost POW to do work on a message versus literally just paying money to Baymail as a costly signal, and I should just keep the money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that
become
is
a
kind of a
signaling
valid
company.
point, isn't it?
It's yes, if signaling is the so, and then the counter argument to that is, well, surely it's a question of like, well, who gets paid that money? Why is it Baymail? And I just make money for what? Nothing, being a signaling service, being a trusted signaling service.
Yeah.
And then you'll just have competitors, and then it's a question of, well, who do you pay? And then it turns into this thing where it's kind of like competing brands in the fashion industry, for example. Who do you give $40,000 to for a gold watch, Rolex or Omega, or which of these companies do you want to use as your signaling device? Because that's what it is effectively. It's like, hey, this is how much expendable income I have or whatever. So yeah, I think that things like Boost and 21E8 solve the problem of who to pay to signal. So the argument is, well, whoever does the work. And then Craig's argument is it's not work because it's not useful, because you're not building blocks. You're just wasting energy on hashing content meaninglessly. So anyway, I think it's a fascinating discussion, and because I'm keen to hear more. And for now, I'm happy to let people attach Boost to their Baymails if they so wish.
I think that the problem I have with it, if I'm actually getting it right, and I guess this does concern Baymail a little bit too, is that the people who will annoy you most with their message or spread the wrong message are often the ones with the most resources. So like increasing the number of resources or money it takes to irritate someone or to like put a story in their face doesn't necessarily make the message any better. It just means that person has more money or can afford to buy more proof of work.
Yes,
because so, I can see spammers paying lots of money. Well, not spammers, maybe PR companies or other lobbyists, that kind of thing. They will pay lots of money just to send Baymails, maybe.
Possibly. So if you imagine, like if we just imagine Coca-Cola or whatever is just trying to flog you more Coca-Cola just because that's it makes you think of capitalism, right?
Yep.
So yes, could they afford to send a 10 cent or $1 bay mail to everyone on Earth? That would be what, $7-ish billion. Is that your argument? I guess that the response to that is, well, the incentive is for them to be a little bit more careful about who they send to, because it costs them something. Whereas with email right now, it doesn't really cost them anything.
Yeah.
Okay, to send to like 1 million people, it probably costs in real terms like what, about $200 or something, from a service that is specifically set up to make sure that it doesn't get blacklisted as a spam bot or whatever. So actually, technically, it does cost a little bit of money to send each email, but it's such a meaningless number that it doesn't really count, especially if you go to 100 million people and that sort of thing. The individual cost is extremely low. So yes, just putting that up to a few cents, I think, makes people really think more about who they're sending to, and takes the burden off the people to filter that content for relevance. That's where the thinking comes from, at least. So yeah. But your argument was something along the lines of people with more money might be more annoying, in fact, and it doesn't mean they're right, and it doesn't mean they have better information.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually thinking about Baymail when I first came up with that thought. I was probably thinking more about Boost, but yeah,
Okay.
the thought that you could trust information more if someone's put proof of work behind it, I don't think that's true, because I don't want to get all tinfoil hat or anything here, but I think some of the biggest mainstream media outlets have been responsible for a lot of the disinformation that we're seeing now, and we've seen over the past couple of years too. So,
And they have plenty of money, I guess, is your argument, right?
Sometimes they're backed by governments too.
So they already do this.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about, they already do that, right? Because
Exactly.
the production quality of something like that is a costly signal. If you have a studio with studio lights and a virtual background and stuff like that, like you do yourself, that's a costly signal. That takes time and effort to set up. It takes a good computer to do the rendering, etc. So yes, I know what you mean. Maybe I can try and articulate my thoughts on that. I guess I haven't really answered your question.
Oh, it doesn't matter. The question doesn't actually need to be answered.
It's an interesting question.
Just riff on it a little bit.
So I guess it sounds like the place you're coming from is what I would classify as like a communist position. Just to really antagonize you. What I mean by that is, like, the Boost argument is like an ultra-capitalist argument. It's like, if you have money, it's because you have provided more differential of value to everyone around you in proportion to the value they're providing you, and that's why you've accumulated wealth. So people should listen to people who have accumulated wealth honestly. So I do agree with that principle, but then of course your argument is like, there are plenty of entities that have accumulated wealth dishonestly.
Not necessarily.
Is that the
I mean,
argument?
I think I'm not an egalitarian or a communist by any stretch. So I think it's fine that there's a total imbalance there. But I think maybe I read it wrong, but I thought Boost was insinuating that if there was proof of work behind something, just say it's an article posted on a website, if someone's put proof of work behind that, then it must be inherently more trustworthy. And I don't know. Am I getting it wrong?
No. There's one little piece of information that's not quite there, and that is that it doesn't mean the thing that has been boosted is like fundamentally more truthy. It's that over time, in a system that incorporates proof of work like this, the people who say things that are false slowly lose energy because they're spending it on this boost, and the people who are honest are not expending as much energy, or rather they can sort of, I don't get that argument completely, but I guess the point is that it's not supposed to work in one go. Right. It's supposed to work over time. In aggregate, it should weed out people who disinform and enrich the people who are spreading truth. So the exact mechanism, actually, I'm kind of confused about, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm probably thinking more
But
about propaganda campaigns. I mean, you can get propaganda campaigns that go over centuries. That's
totally.
why we still have disagreements, after all these times about fundamental things. Like what caused the Great Depression, that kind of thing. What caused
Totally.
World War One, and people can still believe things years and years after they were disproven. And there's governments, people, groups, organizations, whatever. Like they've got a vested interest in keeping a certain story going. So they might be well
Totally.
resourced. The Federal Reserve might want to put out a message that it does an essential job, and whether it does or not, I'm not saying that, but whether it does or not, they've got a lot of resources, infinite resources,
Sure.
as we're finding out now. So yeah, they can
Well,
keep it
but
going for a while.
that's a great example. So the Fed, if you, let's just like super simplify it and just imagine the Fed can print its own money and therefore its own wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So to drastically simplify the situation, if imagine with no complexity, they just produced money.
Mm-hmm.
The point of Boost is you can't just produce energy. It actually has to come from somewhere and you have to transform it.
Mm.
So the point is you can't fake that.
Yeah.
So you can't just print money. You can't just print energy out of nothing. So the whole point is to move from something that is fake to move to something that is unfakeable. And that is energy expenditure. So if you see some piece of information that's had, $100,000 worth of energy burnt into it, maybe you would pay attention to it. I don't know.
You might.
I think I would.
People do definitely pay more attention to the big corporate and big government news sites than they do to something posted on Medium. So
yeah,
or even like an independent news site, no matter how reliable it is.
And people hold Medium higher than just an independent website that has crap font.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. And for anyone who's going to post in the comments, how much of a dickhead I am for thinking all of this stuff, I don't actually have an argument here. I don't have a strong opinion on this. I'm just I'm just trying to understand it by putting up a few hypotheticals, that kind of thing.
Totally.
Anyway, well, I don't want to keep you all morning because, like I said before, I know you do have stuff to do and you probably want to get back to it. But so, is there anything else you want everyone to know? We've gone through the Baymail updates. You talked about Roundesk integration there. Did you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of aware that there's a lot of work to do on Roundesk as well. I have a list beside me here of things that need to be built into Roundesk that I haven't had time to implement yet. So I guess worth mentioning that I plan to integrate Roundesk more into Baymail so that you can see who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So if you're writing a message, at least in desktop, I'm not sure how useful that's going to be in mobile because it's crammed for space already, but just to give an indication of like who you're talking to. So there's some context as you type. There are all sorts of sort of writing assistants that do this so that it sort of reminds you what kind of language to use for the person's, I don't know, technical ability or seniority or whatever it is. Skilled typists will have different sort of language for different people they're communicating with. So I think that's important to integrate into to Baymail, but also things like being able to vouch for people, being able to sort of create group chats from Roundesk. That was the original intention, is to try and build teams of people that might be able to form a company together. So they can start a private chat that sort of starts with the intent of actually producing something and quickly, and then being able to sort of post those ideas on Roundesk and having people vote on the merit or perhaps attach proof of work to the ideas and things like that. So I'm not sure, but there's lots that can be done and so little time in the day to do it that yes, I don't know if that's a good sentiment to end on.
Well, my heartfelt apologies because I think I just took up some of the best hours of your day, but maybe.
No, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like, if we don't speak like this, then who knows? You probably just sprung up a whole like product just by having this conversation. That's what these conversations are for, in my mind, at least. Like, because if you don't articulate things, they just stay in your head, and nothing gets done. If you force me to think about it, it might actually do something beneficial.
Well, I've been stuck in a house with mainly an 8-year-old for company for the past 6 weeks, so my thoughts are kind of on that level.
Fair.